When an empath finally survives the narcissist's abyss, Carl Jung saw that they don't just recover, they are reborn as a force the narcissist is fundamentally incapable of understanding. The person who was once a sponge for every dark projection becomes energetically waterproof. The soul that was a vessel for everyone else's baggage develops a core of unshakable gravity. And perhaps most unsettling, their quiet presence begins to act as a mirror, forcing others to see the very shadows they desperately tried to offload. Think about that moment. You absorbed their paranoia, their bitterness, their bottomless need until your own reflection felt alien. You were the designated processor for all their undealt with trauma, and they got to walk away feeling light, leaving you to sift through the emotional debris. But then, a change happens. Not a loud explosion, but a silent, seismic shift in your core. You cease justifying your existence to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop metabolizing feelings that don't belong to you. And most powerfully, your energy is no longer available to be siphoned for their self-created crises. Jung named this journey individuation. I call it the declaration of energetic sovereignty. And the being that emerges from this fire is not the same soul that got caught in the narcissist's web. It's a new archetype entirely, one Jung knew could recalibrate every relationship it touches. But here is the secret most never grasp about this metamorphosis. It isn't found in talk therapy or self-help mantras. It is forged in what Jung termed the night sea journey, a plunge into a personal hell so absolute that it burns away everything false, leaving only the indestructible truth of who you are. The empath who makes it through this becomes something Jung chronicled, but seldom discussed openly. They become what I refer to as a mirror soul, someone who has stared into the void of human negativity and walked out, not unscathed, but with their light fundamentally re-engineered. As Jung put it, a man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. The dynamic with a narcissist is that very inferno. It is a spiritual forge that will either incinerate you or alchemize you into something that has never existed before. This is more than healing. This is an upgrade in consciousness, the precise kind of evolutionary leap Jung saw as critical for the soul's maturation. And the narcissist, in their insatiable drive to consume your spirit, unwittingly provides the exact pressure needed for your greatest breakthrough. They believe they are breaking you, but they are actually tempering you into a blade they can no longer touch. Jung dedicated his life to studying psychological archetypes, and he found a troubling pattern in deeply sensitive people. They often become what I term emotional lightning rods, unconsciously wired to attract and ground the psychic storms that others refuse to face. Jung stated, "The healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers. But the empath is a third path, the one who absorbs the torture but refuses to pass it on." This leads to what Jung called participation mystique, a state of unconscious fusion, where the empath loses the ability to tell where their own feelings end and the other's projections begin. The narcissist preys on this opening with surgical precision, using the empath's sensitivity as their personal toxic waste site. But this is where Jung's genius shines. He realized this parasitic relationship holds a hidden evolutionary key. Jung wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. The empath-narcissist crucible forces this outgrowing in the most direct and painful way imaginable. It is consciousness expansion through crisis, spiritual growth through a psychological siege. The narcissist is the living embodiment of what Jung called the denied shadow. All the darkness they will not own. The empath is made to carry this disowned shadow, but in shouldering it, they start to understand darkness with an intimacy that permanently changes their view of the world." Jung believed that the psyche evolves through the collision of opposites, and this dynamic is one of the most potent accelerators for consciousness known to man. The empath doesn't just see the shadow, they are forced to integrate it until they develop what I call psychic sonar, the ability to detect emotional dishonesty as a felt sense in the body. If you've ever felt like you were carrying the emotional weight of another person, comment below. I was their emotional lightning rod. Or Jung wrote about the dark night of the soul, but for an empath in a narcissistic entanglement. This is better described as a psychic submersion. You aren't just observing the darkness, you are forced to breathe it. The narcissist's projections don't just wound you, they hijack your internal operating system. Their insecurity becomes your anxiety. Their anger becomes your jumpiness. Their emptiness hollows you out from the inside. You are literally marinating in their psychological poison until your own sense of self begins to dissolve. Jung called this a psychic infection, and he wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." For the empath, however, this pain has a collective dimension. You are metabolizing the shadow of generations of unhealed wounds. The narcissist drags you into what Jung called the nigrado, the blackening, stage of inner alchemy where everything you thought was real dissolves. Jung wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. But to find that secret order, you must first survive the chaos." But here's the miracle Jung discovered about this poisoning. The soul has its own immune system. When a foreign psychic entity is forced upon your consciousness, your true self begins producing what I call spiritual antibodies. These antibodies learn to recognize manipulative energy at a root level. This is why the empath's transformation is so deep. You don't just learn about manipulation as a concept, your very cells develop a visceral allergy to inauthenticity. Jung wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." The empath who survives this ordeal has consciously processed more darkness than most people will ever acknowledge. You become what Jung called a wounded healer, but with a twist. You were wounded by another's unconscious shadow, but you heal by making that very shadow conscious within yourself. Jung observed, the most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. This is the prize for the empath who endures. They gain a profound inner stillness, forged by having faced the storm and discovering they are the eye of it. Jung explored what he termed ego death, the point where the constructed, false self shatters. For empaths escaping narcissistic abuse, this death is devastating because their false identity was built on being accommodating, kind, and perpetually available. The snapping point isn't loud. It's a cold, quiet realization. You look in the mirror one morning, and a stranger looks back. Your empathy feels like a burned-out circuit. Your optimism feels naive. Your capacity to trust feels like a phantom limb. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But for the empath at this nadir, there feels like no self is left. You've been colonized by so much foreign psychological data that your authentic self is buried. This is the heart of Jung's Negrado, the alchemical phase where everything solid turns to ash. Jung observed, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." But how can you accept this psychic death when you don't even know who is left to do the accepting? You've been so focused on the inner worlds of others that you've lost the map to your own. But here is the key Jung understood that unlocks everything. He wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That choice only truly appears after the false self is completely gone. The people-pleasing, conflict, avoidant self must fully die for the sovereign self to be born. And the narcissist, in their campaign to erase your identity, accidentally becomes the demolisher of your false self. This is why I call them unwitting catalysts. They perform a kind of psychic surgery that can trigger individuation more powerfully than years of therapy. Jung wrote, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." The narcissist shoves you so deep into psychological nonsense that you have no choice but to discover your own unwavering sense. In that void, something ancient stirs. Jung called it the self, the archetype of wholeness that lies beneath all programming. The empath realizes they are not their trauma, not the emotions they absorbed, not their need to be needed. They are something vaster. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." For many, this remains a nice idea. The empath who survives narcissistic abuse lives this truth in their bones, because every identity that was not theirs has been burned away. Jung was drawn to alchemy as a perfect metaphor for psychic transformation. The empath's path is what Jung called the opus contra naturam, the work against nature, that creates something entirely new. What steps out of that psychological fire is not the same person. It's what I call the sovereign empath, someone who retains all their sensitivity but has encased it in impenetrable energetic boundaries. Jung described this process in his concept of the transcendent function, the psyche's power to forge a new reality from the tension of opposites. The surviving empath has united their light and their shadow, their vulnerability and their power, their wound and their wisdom. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But this is the critical distinction. The narcissist stays asleep, while the empath awakens with blinding clarity. This integration creates what Jung termed psychological sovereignty, but what I call energetic immunity. You become fundamentally immune to manipulation because you've learned to see the energetic signature of a projection before it even forms into words. It's like gaining thermal vision after being forced to navigate in total blackness. The narcissist's games, which once felt like psychic assaults, now seem transparent and almost clumsy, not because you've become callous, but because you've become conscious." Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The transformed empath has made the mechanics of manipulation conscious, thereby stripping them of their power. You see the puppet strings long before the show is supposed to start. But here is where the change radiates outward. The sovereign empath doesn't just deflect manipulation, their very presence makes it impossible. Jung called this the constellation effect, when one individual's heightened consciousness influences the entire field around them. Jung observed, "As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being." The transformed empath becomes this kind of light, not a naive, consumable light, but a focused, revealing light that makes shadows visible. Comment if you have reached the stage where manipulation attempts feel predictable and almost boring. I see the game now. Jung spent his life mapping archetypes, the universal blueprints of the human psyche, but he spoke of one that only awakens after passing through an extreme trial by fire. This is the archetype I call the mirror soul, someone who has journeyed to the underworld of the human psyche and returned with its secrets. The mirror soul is a type of wounded healer, as Jung would say, but with a key difference. The traditional wounded healer heals from their wound. The mirror soul heals from their wholeness. Jung wrote, "Everyone you meet knows something you don't know, but need to know. Learn from them." The mirror soul has learned the one thing most people spend their lives avoiding: how to navigate the deepest, darkest parts of human nature and not be destroyed by them. You become a walking testament to the possibility of energetic sovereignty. Your existence alone challenges the unspoken agreements that keep people locked in cycles of dysfunction. Jung observed, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. This is precisely why your transformed presence becomes so agitating to the unconscious. You are no longer playing by the rules of the collective unconsciousness that Jung saw as the source of so much suffering. You have exited the matrix of projection and counter-projection." Jung wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. The mirror soul has decisively won this struggle. You've acquired what I call psychic immunity, the ability to hold your own conscious reality, even when immersed in a sea of groupthink and emotional contagion. But this freedom can feel isolating." Jung called it the loneliness of the individuated. The cost of true consciousness is a degree of separation from the sleeping masses. Jung wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people about one. but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. And yet, this is not an empty loneliness. It is filled with a profound connection to your authentic self that most people only dream of. You learn that being alone with your own true soul is far richer than being in a crowd that only relates to a mask. Jung observed, to be normal is the ultimate aim of the unsuccessful. The mirror soul has moved beyond the need for normalcy, having found something infinitely more precious: authenticity. Jung found that deeply individuated individuals become what I call consciousness activators. Their very presence forces others into a state of self-awareness, often for the very first time. The transformed empath becomes this kind of activator, but unlike the passive mirror they once were, reflecting whatever was projected onto them, they now reflect only the truth. This triggers what Jung called projection withdrawal, when people can no longer use you as a dumping ground for their shadow. It boomerangs back to them. This is intensely threatening for those who are unconscious, and it explains why your transformation can provoke such extreme reactions. Some will despise you for this mirroring. They will label you selfish, arrogant, or broken. Jung understood this perfectly. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but most people prefer irritation to understanding. Others will be intensely drawn to your new energy. They recognize a quality of self-possession that is both captivating and intimidating." Jung called this the numinous effect. When archetypal power becomes tangible in a person, if you notice people treating you very differently after your transformation, comment, "My frequency changed, and the world responded." But the most powerful impact is on other empaths who are still ensnared. Your very being serves as a permission slip, proof that escape and transformation are not just fantasies, that they don't have to live as psychic hostages. Jung saw a central paradox in our development. True strength is not found in controlling anyone else, but in mastering yourself so thoroughly that no one else can control you. The transformed empath is the living embodiment of this. They become incredibly influential precisely because they have no need for influence. They have found what Jung called the treasure hard to attain, complete ownership of their own soul. Jung wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." The transformed empath lives this. Their boundaries are not verbal warnings, they are their lived reality. They don't have to announce their limits because they embody them. This results in what I call paradoxical influence. The less you need from others, the more they are drawn to your authentic center. The less you require their validation, the more they value your opinion. The more unavailable you are for their drama, the more they respect your peace. Jung wrote, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power. And where the will to power is paramount, love is lacking." The transformed empath has moved beyond the will to power through self-love. This isn't narcissism. It's what Jung called appropriate self-regard, the bedrock of any healthy connection. You can only offer others the quality of presence you possess within yourself. And the transformed empath possesses a rare and unshakable self-worth. Jung observed, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." The empath who has weathered narcissistic abuse has been forced into the most radical form of self-acceptance. Not the comfortable kind, but the kind that's forged in a crucible. But here's the ultimate paradox. By refusing to be a dumping ground for anyone, you become more available for real connection than ever before. By closing the door to manipulation, you open a space for authentic intimacy to grow. Jung wrote, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness." The transformed empath knows this balance in their bones. They can hold space for the darkness in others without taking it into their own system. You evolve from what Jung would call an unconscious sponge, soaking up psychic waste, into a conscious container with impenetrable boundaries, able to hold space without being consumed. Jung believed certain individuals are called to what he called a guardian function, protecting the integrity of the collective psyche simply by being who they are. The transformed empath often steps into this role, not by fighting or crusading, but by embodying boundaries so clear they serve as a blueprint for others. Jung wrote, "To ask the right question is already half the solution of a problem." Your boundaries become a living question that quietly invites others to inspect their own patterns. You become what I call a lighthouse of sovereignty, living proof that this state is attainable. Other empaths see your light and start to believe in their own possible freedom. This guardian role works through what Jung might call morphic resonance. Your level of consciousness creates a field that makes it easier for others to level up. You don't have to teach anything. You just have to be. Jung wrote, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity." Your transformed self creates new possibilities for others just by existing as proof that authenticity is survivable. Your presence becomes the only argument you need for psychological liberation. Jung also warned of what I call the integration paradox, the risk of over-identifying with your transformation and becoming rigid in the other extreme. Some newly transformed empaths swing from being porous to being walled off. They confuse invulnerability with strength and solitude with safety. But true integration, what Jung called the union of opposites, is holding both your empathy and your boundaries, your softness and your strength, your compassion and your discernment. The aim is not to stop feeling, but to feel with consciousness. Jung wrote, "Emotion, which is suffering, ceases to be suffering as soon as we form a clear and precise picture of it." The integrated empath feels everything, but is owned by nothing. They can witness suffering without absorbing it. They can offer compassion without self-sacrifice. They can love fully without losing their center. This is a dynamic balance that requires what Jung called constant vigilance. The old programming of absorption and enmeshment will try to creep back in, especially in moments of weakness. But once you have tasted energetic freedom, you can never fully return to the prison of unconsciousness. Your entire psychic operating system has been upgraded. Jung was convinced that individual transformation is the only path to collective transformation. He wrote, "The individual is the only reality." The further we move away from the individual towards abstract ideas, the more likely we are to fall into error. The transformed empath initiates what I call a consciousness cascade. Their personal liberation gives unspoken permission for others to claim their own. This happens through being, not through doing. People feel the coherence of your energy field, and it makes them question their own chaotic patterns. You are living evidence that emotional trauma does not have to be a life sentence, that sensitivity and strength are not opposites, that empathy does not require martyrdom. People will try to drag you back into the old dance with guilt, manufactured crisis, or manipulation. Jung called this the crab bucket effect, the unconscious drive to pull down anyone who is climbing out. But your transformation has rendered you immune. You see these attempts for what they are, projections of their own trapped state, not a genuine claim on your energy. If this journey of transformation resonates with you, comment, "My scars became my shield." The empath who navigates the narcissist's darkness and comes out the other side doesn't just heal. They evolve into a new expression of human consciousness that Jung's work points toward. You become living proof of the soul's incredible resilience, that consciousness can be forged in the most toxic of environments, and that true power lies not in controlling others, but in the unwavering mastery of oneself. The narcissist intended to extinguish your light, but instead, they accidentally focused it into an unbreakable laser. They tried to shatter your empathy, but instead, they refined it into a conscious compassion that cannot be weaponized against you. Your transformation is a beacon for every other empath still lost in the fog, proving that freedom is not just possible, it's your destiny once you finally understand the nature of the game. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens." The journey through the narcissistic abyss forces you to look so deeply inside that you find the unshakable center of your own being. That center was always there. The narcissist just did you the favor of burning away everything that was hiding it. If you want to dive deeper into distinguishing your authentic self from the projections you've absorbed, check out my video on the 8 signs you were never meant to fit into this world, where I further explore Jung's insights on those who perceive reality from a more conscious vantage point. Your sensitivity was never a flaw. It was a dormant superpower, waiting for the pressure of this journey to finally activate it. Thank you for walking this path of awareness with me. I'll see you at the next level of consciousness.